They called him a hero, a rebel, a man who stood up to the banks and the railroads while the government looked the other way. Women sewed his name into quilts. Children played games pretending to be him. Newspapers turned him into a legend before he was 30 years old. Jesse James, the outlaw America couldn't stop loving. But here's what they didn't tell you in those dime novels and folk songs. The man they were worshiping had the blood of innocence on his hands. He wasn't robbing from the rich to give to the poor. He was a killer who found a country desperate enough to turn murder into mythology. And the darker truth? We knew. Deep down, America always knew. We just decided the lie was more comforting than the reality. This isn't just about Jesse James. It's about what happens when a nation is so broken, so angry, so defeated that it needs villains to become heroes. It's about the stories we tell ourselves when the truth is too painful to face. Because Jesse James didn't become a legend by accident. He became one because America needed him to be. And understanding why reveals something uncomfortable about who we were then and who we still are now. Let's start with the version you know, the romanticized myth. After the Civil War, the South was destroyed. Not just defeated, but humiliated. Towns burned. Economies shattered. Families torn apart. And into that wreckage came the railroads and the banks, buying up land, foreclosing on farms, crushing anyone who got in their way. They were the new enemy. Faceless corporations backed by Northern money, swallowing the South whole. And the law? The law worked for them. So when Jesse James and his gang started robbing trains and banks, something strange happened. People cheered. Not just outlaws and criminals. Regular people. Farmers who'd lost their land. Veterans who'd come home to nothing. They saw Jesse as someone finally fighting back. Someone who wouldn't bow to the system. The newspapers picked up on it. They turned him into a Robin Hood figure. Even though there's almost no evidence he ever gave stolen money to the poor. But that didn't matter. The story was better than the truth. He was everything the defeated South wanted to believe about itself. Defiant, unconquerable, free. But here's where the myth starts to crack. Because while America was falling in love with Jesse James the idea, they were ignoring Jesse James the man. He wasn't robbing from the rich. He was robbing from everyone. In Gallatin, Missouri, he walked into a bank and shot the cashier in the head. The man's name was John Sheets. He wasn't a railroad tycoon. He was just a guy working a job. Jesse thought he was someone else, a Union soldier from a war. He was wrong. Didn't matter. He killed him anyway and rode off. When the James gang robbed the train in Adair, Iowa, they tore up the tracks, derailing the engine. The engineer died in the crash. His name was John Rafferty. He had a family. He wasn't rich. He was just doing his job. The gang then went through the train, terrorizing passengers, taking whatever they wanted. Women handed over their jewelry, while gang members held guns to their heads. This wasn't resistance. This was violence. Raw, indiscriminate violence. And the entire time, the newspapers kept printing the myth. Jesse James, friend of the common man. Jesse James, the outlaw with a code. But there was no code. There was just a man who'd learned to kill during the war and never stopped. A man who discovered that America would forgive him for anything as long as he aimed his gun at the right targets. And here's the paradox that should haunt us. The people who loved Jesse James knew what he was doing. They read about the murders. They heard about the innocent victims. But they didn't care. Or worse, they justified it. They told themselves that John Sheets must have deserved it somehow. That John Rafferty was collateral damage in a larger fight. Because admitting the truth that their hero was just a murderer would mean admitting they'd been worshiping a monster. And that was too painful. So they kept the lie alive. They kept singing the songs and telling the stories and turning a killer into a martyr. Even after Jesse's own gang member, Robert Ford, shot him in the back in 1882, the myth didn't die. It grew stronger. Ford became the coward who killed a legend. Jesse became the eternal rebel, frozen in time, never having to answer for what he'd actually done. America built him a legacy out of blood and lies, and we called it justice. But let's go deeper, because Jesse James wasn't an anomaly. He was a symptom. All across the West, America was doing the same thing, elevating outlaws, turning violence into virtue. Billy the Kid, Butch Cassidy, the Dalton Gang. These weren't freedom fighters. They were criminals. But we needed them to be something more. Because the real villains, the railroads, the banks, the politicians, they were untouchable. They had the law on their side. They had the power. So we created folklore heroes to fight them in our imagination. Even though in reality, those heroes were just making everything worse. They were killing people, terrifying communities, making the West more dangerous, not less. But we forgave them. We celebrated them. Because the alternative was admitting we were powerless. And that was unbearable. Here's what makes this story so disturbing. It never ended. We're still doing it. We still Leoneize people who break the rules as long as they're breaking them against targets we don't like. We still turn criminals into folk heroes when their crimes align with our anger. We still tell ourselves comforting lies about violent men because facing the truth would mean facing something ugly in ourselves. Jesse James died over 140 years ago, but the impulse that made him a legend, that's still alive. It's in every anti-hero we worship, every vigilante we cheer for, every time we decide that violence is okay if it's aimed at the right people. We inherited his myth, and we've never let it go. And the cost? The cost was paid by people whose names you'll never know. By John Sheets, who was just working in a bank. By John Rafferty, who was just driving train. By all the people who got caught in the crossfire of a legend. They didn't get songs written about them. They didn't get to be remembered. They just died so America could have a story that made us feel better about losing a war and losing control of our own country. Their blood is the ink that wrote the myth. And we never even bothered to learn their names. Jesse James wasn't a hero. He was a man who killed people and got away with it because we needed him to be something he wasn't. And the real tragedy isn't that he fooled us. It's that we fooled ourselves. We knew what he was. We just decided the legend was more important than the truth. And that decision, that willingness to trade reality for mythology, that's the darker truth behind every outlaw America ever loved. We built them. We fed them. We kept them alive. Not because they deserved it, but because we needed someone to be what we couldn't, even if it meant ignoring the bodies they left behind.